Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. In today's episode of Garden Ramblings, I'm going to do a full tour, really give you an update on the tomato plants. The tomatoes are ripening now. You'll get to see the size, tell you a little bit about, the different varieties. These are my Muscadines, similar to grapes, and I just want to show you the blueberries are fading out. The blackberries I pretty much ate, and the Muscadines are going to be coming in. So one of my goals is just to have a lot of fruit coming in, and these are the Muscadines that are growing on the outside of my garden. The deer tend to leave them alone. Haven't had any of this new growth chewed down in different places. When my tomatoes grow through the fence, beans grow through the fence, the deer do eat it. So this is somewhat resistant to deer, but just this year I'm just getting tons of Muscadines, which will be wonderful. Tip on sunflowers. This is my patch of sunflowers that I planted by seed well after the nature planted seeds, were growing back in April and stuff. But you can still plant sunflowers. You still have time. They grow really quickly when it's warm. They're good to flower. They're good to grow at different angles. And I had to tie these together. You basically want to make sure you pull the sunflower in and try and get it straight as possible, because they are really heavy, and then it's tied off to the fence. If you don't do that, they're going to grow at an angle, and they're slowly going to drop towards the ground, and then they're going to fall over. So unless they're perfectly straight, you want to make sure you're tying them up. These will support each other. They should be fine. Let's spin around. So the blueberries are finishing up. We've had, I'm in Maryland Zone 7, a good 4 weeks of 90 plus, really 95 degree plus temperatures. Blueberries did well. Harvested a lot of them off there. Fruit trees have been pruned back. They're growing back with some voracity again, but no fruit on any of these trees. Next year with the pruning, with the new growth, I'm hoping to get a lot more fruit. The peppers growing in here, I forget how many there are, but maybe 12 in this 2 or 3 foot by 6 foot space. The peppers look really, really good. These are the shishitos. I've been picking these, grilling these, and I'm going to be using them again tonight. I'm going to have some friends over. But they look really healthy, nice and green. The whole key to my garden was watering. In this 4-week span, we maybe had 1 day of really good rain, maybe a day and a half, but not a whole lot going on. And you can see the peppers are looking great. 3 peppers, all jalapenos. This one's growing at a different rate for some reason, doing really well. Sometimes that just happens, but the leaves are just beautiful. Nice dark green. They don't need to be fed. If your plants look good, you've been taking care of them. There's really no need to keep feeding your pepper plants. If they're dark green, they're flowering, they're doing pretty well. And they did well in the heat. I didn't cover these with shade cloth. The parts of my garden that got really beat up were my containers. They were just drying out crazily, and I was staying up pretty well. I had a couple days where I got tired. I usually get burned out personally mid to late July. It takes a couple of weeks, my energy comes back. But this time I did pretty well, taking care of myself, pacing myself, but also taking care of the garden. The containers did suffer, and what you can do is you can cut back your strawberries and they're going to come back and grow. I didn't do that for all of them because I want the runners to come out so I can propagate them. They're just going to get beat up at this point in many of our garden areas, many of our zones. And it's normal, it's fine, they're going to be okay. No worries there, just realize they're going to get beat up. And then, come back. Today it's going to be 82, a nice break in the temperatures. And come back, clean them up. Give them some water-soluble fertilizer if you're cutting back the leaves, or if it's time, if you haven't fed them for a while. And they're going to come back nice and strong, and you'll probably get more strawberries later August and September, maybe even October. Eggplant does love the heat. It's early morning. You can see I still have some dust on there. This guy took off and is growing really nicely. The other one next to it has been smaller. It's been getting hit with water-soluble. It's finally the right color, starting to grow, so it should catch up with this eggplant, no problem. I'll be getting lots of them. Peppers are looking good, nice and green. Everything's really producing well. And I've been saying it a lot last year, even more so this year. Watering has been the key to my success here. Not any kind of special fertilizer regimens, any kind of mixtures or changes in the amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, or anything like that. It's just been consistent watering. My fig, which I never removed, it always grows really well. It just never gets figs. It's just, you know, not the right variety. It's not in the right zone. Maybe with the winters becoming milder here in Maryland, I think it's going to do something, but we'll see. I mean, it really has to come out. Here's my first eggplant that went in. I wanted to show you, you know, you want to pick them when they're a nice dark color, not necessarily the size, you know, getting to that size. When they're turning a little bit orange brown, they're kind of past their prime. So this was the first one on there. This was the second one. These two, this one might taste okay. That one may not taste the best, but you really want to get them when they're a nice dark color and to get to the size you want. So I have 4 eggplant, which is plenty. Blackberries have finished up. The canes that produced fruit, I'm going to leave on there because they're still green. They'll pull in some energy for the root system, but they're not going to produce fruit next year. So if they get beat up, or I need to, you know, some space in here, need to let some light in, like the ones that are beat up right in there, you can remove those canes now. I usually wait really till October or November or something like that. And here's a good example too. Like some of these I'm going to remove. These have all been, you know, producing fruit, so they need to come out, and it's going to give me more space in here so I can walk through, because my cherry tomato plants are doing extremely well. I only put 3 in here. I've been putting in 4. One of the ways that I really managed and dealt with kind of, you know, getting burned out at the end of July, like I said, is just planting less plants. So the chore load is a little bit lower. This is just the basic old yellow grape. There's no variety on there, so I can't tell you what it is. I believe those are sun golds. They are. I mean, look how well they're doing. These are all going to get harvested over the next couple of days. I think that's a black cherry down there. This is a lemon boy, and it's starting to produce nicely. It's only about 4 feet tall. Just look at all the beautiful tomatoes. These are the Whopper variety, which I do recommend. Big Beef, All America Selections winner. Smaller plant. Lots of nice tomatoes in there. And this is the Mortgage Lifter, which is a beast of a plant, 6 feet tall. And if you like large tomatoes, like 1 and 2 pounders, this is the one for you to grow. I mean, that's going to be a nice big tomato. Basil, first round. You've seen me cut this back in videos, how to have basil all season long. And I've, you know, cut this back. Well, I should say that. I cut it back harshly, just halved it. Comes back nicely. When you see the flowers coming out, remove them. I'm getting distracted by, oh, that was just dirt. So I thought that was insects hanging out on the basil, which I've never seen before, and which is a sign I probably need glasses if I thought that they were insects. I'm also inspecting the leaves of the plants. So down here, I take a look at this. That looks a little bit like early blight, except, right? Let's see if I can turn it. There's no true concentric circles in the brown area. So I'm in the process of spraying my tomato plants with hydrogen peroxide. I have a routine. The routine really, and I usually say just spray every 7, 10, 14 days, 21 days, whatever works for you. And that's great if you're just getting started. I have a routine because I've been doing this for a while, and I inspect my plants pretty regularly. I actually, you know, spray maybe once a month. And I don't recommend doing this unless you have a lot of experience. Spray once a month as a preventative, just to keep, you know, keep things under control. And this reduces my workload. But I'm always looking for leaf patterns that tell me that there's an issue. And as soon as I see it, I will spray the plants. And these are, you know, looking really healthy. What else do we have? This is a Marglobe. Lots of smaller tomatoes. Sometimes your tomatoes are going to look really funky. It's called cat facing. Temperatures do that. This is the Bonnie's Best. And they're doing really well. This is a currant type tomato. This is a weird leaf pattern, and I'm not sure what it is, if it's nutritional or what. I'm going to hit it with a liquid soluble fertilizer. Not going to spray much on here, maybe hydrogen peroxide. It's really producing. Look at these clusters. These are currant type tomatoes. Not technically a true tomato, but we call them tomatoes. But look at, they're just beautiful tomatoes. Let's see. Tiny tomatoes is what I wanted to say. Beautiful, tiny tomatoes. A bit of work to pick them, but they're great in salads. I mean, look at this cluster. Like, I'll just be picking, let's see if I can show it to you, this entire cluster. This is a Candyland variety in All America Selections winner. Gooseberry, yellow, grape type. I think that's Midnight Snack in there. We'll have to go check that one out from the other side. And then let's go over to this guy. And the tomatoes are doing extremely well. This is the Juliet, just did a profile on it. And this is the one that's just super prolific. And it's getting chewed up by something, so it's going to get dust. I think I controlled it because I saw those, all these little holes in there earlier on. There's some eggs. That's always interesting. They look like squash bug eggs. Let's remove those. I don't see that too often, to be honest with you. You know, and I'm thinking anytime I see eggs or something on the leaves of my tomato plants, I'm thinking tomato hornworm. But they look pretty good. Yellow die-off at the bottom, that's pretty normal. This is an area that I looked at closely a couple days ago. This plant did get sprayed with hydrogen peroxide. That could be a leaf spot. Anytime you have brown spots, yellow halo around the spots, it's a point of concern. I don't see any true halos. There's yellowing on the leaf. But it'd be like a dot and then a perfectly round halo around it. That tells you the fungus is active and moving. But overall, the plant looks pretty good. Let's take a look to see what this one is. I don't see it, but I'm pretty sure it's the Midnight Snack, which is a beautiful, let's put this in frame, beautiful cherry tomato. When it's out in the sun, it turns a nice purple on top and means it's high in anthocyanin, and it's just a really good tomato. The trick for the Midnight Snacks is you really want them to over ripen and they're sweeter. They're not the sweetest tomato, but if you let them ripen really well so that when you press on it, you know, it indents and your finger bounces back, it's going to be a, you know, a sweeter tasting tomato. These are just growing really well. Trellised on a stake, but I just kind of pick them up and weave them through. I have shade cloth down here that typically goes over this structure, but the tomatoes are just growing up, you know, through it, so I didn't put the shade cloth up. These did manage well through the temperatures. Cherry tomatoes tend to do better with higher temperatures. Just look at all the clusters here. These are the sweet cherry 100s. It's a great cherry tomato, smaller cherry type, you know, not the larger 1 ounce fruits. This is a pretty much standard in my garden now. Very prolific. I mean, you can just see like so many tomatoes. So I have 3 cherries where I showed you. I have 4, 5, 6. The currant 7. Cherry in another place, that's 8. The Juliet's 9. I have a lot of tomatoes on the smaller size. That's going to be plenty. Just look at how nice the sunflowers grew. All self-seeded. Coming into this space, this is part of the first wave of basil. Cut back harshly again a couple days ago. It just keeps growing and growing. Keep it watered and you can keep your basil plants going. Cantaloupe are starting to form. They're going to need to be supported because as they get heavier, they're going to pull off the vine. Second wave of cucumbers, we can get in there, pull this one off. This has been a nice prolific plant. I forget the variety. What is this? This is Spacemaster bush variety. So even the bush types can get pretty big, but they're a little bit more manageable. But I've been, you know, harvesting cucumbers pretty regularly out of there. We'll go over to my favorite towards the end. Peppers in here, got some shade cloth. We'll talk about that guy over there in a second. And they're doing extremely well. The bell peppers are doing really well. This is my second round. Harvested a bunch off there already. I mean, the production for the peppers have been great this year. Whole key, slow and steady with the fertilizer. You know, the subject of other videos, but really keeping up with the watering. These are gypsy peppers. Harvested probably, I don't know, 30 peppers off of here already. Looks like there's a couple more. The trick for peppers, where you're getting temperatures up into the upper 90s, they do like some shade. They can manage okay. I'm keeping up on the watering. I'm going to keep stressing that. So they're really doing well. All my plants are doing pretty well. This is a 50% shade cloth. Lets in 50% of the light, creates 50% of the shade. This is an old frame from a cold frame where the plastic and the zippers got all messed up like they always do. But I kept it perfect. I just pulled the shade cloth over, protects the plants. It's going to be 82 today. I can really just pull it back. But you can see just how nicely dark green the peppers are. In here I did a video on saving pepper plants, and these are the plants that were saved. Nice and green. You saw how beat up they were if you watched that video. Here is a cucumber that needs to come off. I'm growing these national picklings. This is too large. When your peppers, or when your cucumber's starting to turn yellow-orange, it's kind of missed its prime. But this cucumber plant, I think there might be two in there, is doing really well. I've even just kind of let it trellis onto the tree. Let's see what else we have. Here's a good size. You want to pick them not much more larger than this. Lots of smaller ones in there. There's one back there. Let's get that guy. And this was one of the first cucumbers I put in. Still producing, and you can see the difference in color. Let me put these down. You know, national pickling, perfect this size, a little bit smaller, a little bit past its prime. But this guy is doing really well. I have a whole series, or a video that I did on cucumber care, and this is one that I said I was going to keep, see if I could kind of get it back to life. It's not dying anymore, but it's not really producing. There's no flowers up there. It is sending out a new vine down there with some flowers, and maybe it's going to be okay, but that's a lot of waiting and a lot of work. Like originally I would have just ripped this out, but for video's sake decided to keep it. If you watch any of my videos too, by the way, when I do the garden ramblings, I'll be doing updates on the different plants that you see for that year. National pickling, doing extremely well. It's greener, healthier, tons of flowers, worth keeping alive. Here's another one. I mean, they're just everywhere. A little bit past its prime. Let me toss that one down there. And you can see just all the, they're really good about that size, just for reference. And there's a lot of them. Two more right there. Three, that's four. I'm sure there's more around there. Point being, this guy was much healthier if you check out that video. Still going, still growing 2 weeks later. This one's not much different over here. You know, I'm keeping it alive, but what's it really getting me? Little bit of a new vine right there. Maybe it'll turn into something. I did tuck a group of seeds right down there. Some more of the market moors yesterday. Super hots look pretty good. If we just step over here, I've actually put in some romaine lettuces, bib lettuces, buttercrunch lettuces in there. A little bit early, but I am getting my cool weather crops in now to just get a harvest sooner into the fall. Your cool weather crops, again, just did a video on that. A lot of them can be planted now. These are my second wave of beets. Looking really good. I've put in some new beets so that I can have a fall harvest. I do want to show you, let's go back over this way. One tip I have too is, You know, when I'm out here doing things, I'm not always cleaning up, but I do take stuff to a central area, just dump it all into there. It's a lot easier to clean up when you have the energy or the time, but this way it's not scattered all over the garden. Put some beets in about a week ago, maybe 5 days ago. Just getting that next wave in. Those are carrots back there. Leeks are doing really well. And I wanted just to show you, because part of what we're doing with the perk memberships is we're growing a handful of vegetables together. These are my purple potted. There are only 3 plants in here, and next year I don't need the single plant that's right in the middle. This plant is huge. It's just on a stake. Purple potted beans, I've been harvesting them. They're delicious. You want to get them, you know, this size or a little bit smaller while they're tender. But 3 plants, so many beans coming off of here. Set this up to create a canopy similar to shade cloth to shade off the peppers a little bit. And the ones on the outside here look pretty good because the sun's getting in here. Some of the peppers down in the center aren't looking the best because they're being shaded too much. So I overdid it. I thought 3, you know, wasn't going to be that much, but these are just crazy growers. That one's doing okay because it's getting some sun. You know, so I should get in there, I'll prune out some of the leaves, everything will be fine. But this was just a way to use a vegetable, beans in this case, to create shade. And you can see that cherry tomatoes, they're just so prolific. I'm not doing a lot of pruning. These will get tucked in. You know, the guy that's right there that's coming out that doesn't have any fruit, I may start cutting them off because everything is really thick up here. As the temperatures change, when the humidity shows up, diseases become a little more prolific in my garden. Again, a good spraying routine is every 10 to 14 days, whatever, you know, fungicide that you pick. And that's a great way to just keep the protection there. If you get a little bit more skilled and you can spot the diseases and you're comfortable with different die-off not worrying you, you can spray a little bit less frequently, but your plants will be okay. All right, let's go back down this way. Bunching onions look good. Cucumbers. Let's go back to the tomatoes. Let's start over here. Giant Belgium. These are all about 6 feet tall. Some die-off on the bottom, nothing to worry about. That guy's not looking too giant down there, but it's okay. The plant here is doing really well. Beautiful, probably 8-10 ounce tomatoes. And just look at them all. However, the problem is it was supposed to be a green zebra, so I'm not sure what I messed up. It could be an old German. It looks similar to the old German right here, the way it has some greening on there, and the tomatoes look very similar, so maybe I planted 2 next to each other. But this variety is old German. This die-off is perfectly normal, comes from just the heat, you know. Some of the plants get stressed out more, some of the plants get damaged more, and a tomato plant will typically take the resources from down low and then send them upward. They're looking good though. This is a shade cloth that I just put on a piece of jute. It should be a little bit higher, it got stretched out. And then I can just slide it along here and, you know, provide protection for the plants when it's sunnier. Over here is the southern sun, so it will come in here, hit the shade cloth, create shade down there, keep the shade cooler, keep the roots cooler, but the sunlight is coming in here. Now, not everybody's going to be able to do this, but if you have, you know, the right setup, you can just put a shade cloth on there. And when you buy a shade cloth, it should have grommets, this, so that you can use it in different ways, secure it to places you need to secure it to. This is the Aunt Ruby's German Green, probably 7 feet tall. All these tomatoes, except for the Juliet, I sell at my seed and garden shop if you want to check that out, the Rusted Garden. This is the pink oxheart. And the tomatoes, you know, have a heart shape to them. Great for sauces. Again, the die-off at the bottom I'm not worried about. Here is a rotted tomato. Let's pull this one off. Don't know why that happened. And if you see something rotted, it could have been damaged. I don't see any issues in there with the other tomatoes, so I'm going to leave them. This will get cut off. After a while, you know, if I bring it in, it just creates so much kind of density with the leaves. It can be a problem. Again, want to stress the routine of hydrogen peroxide. If you're spraying hydrogen peroxide on a routine every 10 to 14 days, you can really do this with your tomatoes. Just, you know, keep an eye on them. Yeah, all the slower damage is not a fungal disease. All right, what else do we have? We have the Homestead variety. It's a semi-determinate tomato, which means it doesn't get as big as an indeterminate variety. Again, there's the die-off. Nice sized tomatoes. That one is split. Looks okay. But just look at, you know, all the baseball sized tomatoes in there. These are my brandywines, which I love growing because the leaves are more like potatoes. They're really just nice specimen plants. That one's 6 feet tall. That's the brandywine yellow. Lots of cat facing on the tomatoes. But, you know, they're a lot of work. These two tomatoes actually get sprayed more often, more on the schedule, because the brandywines, heirlooms, some of these go back to the late 1800s. They just get diseases real easily. Normal die-off. How do I know it's normal die-off? It's been like this for a good 10 days. If this was a fungal disease, it's going to spread like wildfire right up the plant, over to here. This is just normal patterns on your brandywines. But if you don't keep these well watered, you're going to have issues with them. And these are just more susceptible, I find, to cat facing and being misshapen from nature and all that. Growing pretty well. I mean, it's just a beautiful, I mean, look at these leaves. This is probably the best brandywine that I've grown in years. It's just not super prolific. I mean, you got 4, 5, 6, 7 tomatoes on there. You know, so maybe grow one brandywine just to show off the leaves. The flavor is wonderful. They're really tasty, but they're not as prolific as some of the others. Here is another cherry. I don't know how many, I lost count now. This is a chocolate sprinkles, just sitting, you know, in the space. This whole garden was set up so that you could just make a 3-foot row. Tomatillo right in there, pepper plant right in there. Another cherry back there that seeded itself. I think that's a Matt's wild cherry. But the chocolate sprinkles, really nice. Leaf die-off. This was yellow. Got beat up from the heat. Leaves just browned out. No other marks on the cucumbers. On the tomato leaves, some insect damage. If this was a fungal issue, you would see the breakout and you'd see yellow, really rings and sort of halos around anywhere that you have fungus going on, because the fungus progresses out slowly and the leaf, as it's dying out, yellow. So that's how you know you have an active outbreak. You have that yellow halo. But they look really, really good. Lots of cherry tomatoes going to be picked this week. Put in some cilantro. We'll go over to the main area where I'm planting. A couple of dogs just got let out. Another melon plant, Cantaloupe, doing extremely well, going up this giant trellis that I built, and it's doing really well. The biggest thing that you're going to need to do anytime you're trellising any kind of melon is just make sure you support the fruit as it grows, or it's going to pull away. All right, bell peppers, tons of them, doing well. This is my new favorite hybrid cucumber. This is Garden Bush Slicer. Look at that. Beautiful cucumber in there. We have more. Let's see if we do count one. Someone that's messed up, we won't count that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I see one back there. 13. 13 cucumbers from 3 plants that are in there, getting watered just about every day. This is the second grouping of 13 to 15 cucumbers I got. I already took out a big harvest about a week ago, actually. It was actually 15 cucumbers. So we had 15 back then, 13 this time, 3 plants. This is all you really need for a family of 2, even family of 4. Again, this variety was the Golden Golden Bush Slicer Hybrid. I really, really like it. And I'm sure there's more in there to get me up to 15. So, you know, 15 cucumbers every 7 to 10 days when the plant is mature and going. That's really, really good. Again, when the plants, there are 3 plants in here. I don't want to mislead you. Pepper Tower, doing extremely well. Did a video on blossom end rot for your peppers. The upper tier had some blossom end rot because it was just so hot. They weren't getting watered regularly. You can see some of that back there in that one. But the new peppers, no damage. Just water them with the water-soluble fertilizer. I recommend AgroThrive, great organic fertilizer. You can find them in the video description. But generally speaking, they look good. No more blossom end rot. That's just a bell pepper turning color. It's the water, water, water. That's what makes the difference. There's actually 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 pepper plants in here doing really well. Can anybody identify this? Is that an assassin bug? They just started showing up this week. I'm going to check it out, make sure I know what it is, but I feel like it's not doing any damage and it looks pretty menacing, so hopefully it's a good bug. Anytime, like, I'm not going to run out here and start throwing dust down because I'm not sure what that is, but just because you see an insect doesn't mean you need to go crazy with the dust and sprays. Just observe it for a little bit, try and find out what they do. Now here's a closer look. Anyway, if somebody can let me know what that is, that would be great. Pepper Tower really works. You know, I highly recommend it, but you do have to keep up on the watering. Coming in, let's go around this way. Cleaned out a lot of my beds. Put in, you know, these were the 10, I just did a video on 10 crops to plant in August. Beets, I mean, look how quickly they came up. The dates on here say 7/14, but I think I messed up the date. And I messed up the date by putting one down that was too early. So in about 7 days or less, the beets have already sprouted up, the goldens are up, the mixed beets are up, the supremes are up, the early wonders are up. I can see the purple top turnips are up. Now, it may be too early to start your cool season crops now because maybe it's too hot, but experiment, put some of them in. I have carrots in there, cabbage, kale, collards, all coming up. The trick that I'm doing, I've talked about this in the previous video, but I just put all my kale in here, my cabbage in here. This is just a transplant bed. I'm gonna let it grow because I don't wanna pop the seeds where they're good to go in the future because those beds aren't cleared out. And the more you send seeds throughout your garden, the more you have to remember to get out there and water them. This is the Supersonic. Lots of leaves are beat up. We'll see that from the other side in a second. But this is just normal growth. You know, all my tomatoes are getting sprayed today with the hydrogen peroxide because I think I might have seen the early blight or some sort of leaf spot showing up. But it's doing really well. Supersonic variety is really, really prolific. I mean, look how nicely the plants are doing over here. These are fabric pots. Sell them at my seed shop also. But the key, just watering. These are cowpeas. If you've never seen beans grow like this, they grow differently than your Kentucky beans or your pole beans. And I've harvested a lot off of these. These just naturally seed. I let a couple of the plants go. Bell pepper plant, doing well. All right, let's come around here and then we will wrap up. Just wanted to give you a quick look at everything that's going on. So this is the Supersonic, being trellised in a different way. These have to get tied up or tucked into the concrete mesh there. But there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 24, easily 40 tomatoes on here. One plant, Supersonic variety. I do recommend it if you want one plant to really produce nicely for you. All the leaves on here, just natural die-off, going to get sprayed. But don't panic when you see yellowing leaves. A yellow leaf doesn't necessarily mean, you know, all is bad. Butternut squash, one plant, getting watered regularly, going up the panel. Let's get out of here so that the sun isn't creating a glare. I really like growing it this way. It's much easier to take care of, real easy to find insects, insect eggs. You can see some right there. Those are squash bugs. And as I work my way down, you know, I can inspect all the leaves. Easier to look for fungus, disease issues, etc. One butternut squash vine, there's only one plant there, is going to really produce a lot of butternut squash. So family of two, you only really need one plant. You still have time to put in some of your winter squash. Butternut matures pretty quickly. Here in Maryland Zone 7, I could put some in now, middle of July, beginning of August, and I'm still going to get some butternut. And just FYI, that is a female flower. You can see the little baby butternut. And when you come down here, there's no butternut under the flower. That's the male flower. In case I said it wrong, that was the female, that's the male. They both have to open at the same time. The flowers have to open up at the same time. There's nothing you can do to make more flowers. There's nothing you can do to make them open at the same time. They figured it out. It'll work out with nature. You just got to keep it healthy and keep it growing. Beds I already showed you of the different lettuces that I'm growing. Right tucked in here, that's a black Krim. It's not really that tall. I think maybe the sunflower has kept it a little bit smaller. There is truth that the roots of a sunflower tend to inhibit growth of other plants. And the black Krim tastes really good, beautiful color, but they do crack. So that cracking on them is pretty normal. And then tucked in there, again, this plant is much smaller, like the black Krim, than it should be. And I think it is really due to the sunflowers, but that's Cherokee purple. And it's loaded with a good 15 tomatoes on there. So hopefully it'll take off as the sunflowers die out. And I still have a long growing season. The fruit there is also cracked. Bean trellis, self-seeded. It's doing what it's designed to do. I want the beans to come across here and, you know, shade the tomatoes out. The tomatoes are not small because of the sun. A lot of sun comes in through this way. You know, something else is affecting them. Super hots. Let's take a look at these real quick. They're doing really well. They enjoy the heat. When you come over here, you see this damage on there. That's from the sun. That's just sun scald. There's nothing wrong with them. Again, keeping up on the watering is making all the difference, but lots of, you know, super hots ready to go. I don't eat them. I give them away. The garden overall is in good shape. For the, you know, middle towards the end of July. I'm hanging in there. Again, like I was saying, this is where I tend to get tired, but I'm trying to keep up the basics, really sticking with the watering. I think that makes all the difference. And you can see how green and lush everything is. And it's not because of any specialty water-soluble fertilizers. I'm not decreasing the nitrogen, increasing the phosphorus, tweaking stuff here and there. Compost in the garden, organic granular. I do top dressings, water-soluble fertilizer. Again, I use AgriThrive. You don't need to use that. Any water-soluble will work. I really like it though for my organic water-soluble. But plants look really, really healthy. I mean, the plants over here, tomatoes are like 7 feet tall. I want to show you tucked in here too. All self-seeded and coming up right by the trellis. These are asparagus beans or yard-long beans. You know, they get as long as your forearm. You want to pick them at about this size. You can pick them smaller if you want, you know, something like that. Also called noodle beans. I think there's a really massive ones in here. You don't want them to get so large they end up looking like this because the pods get tough. But you could let them grow if you want to collect the beans, replant them, or you can cook them and eat them. You know, at this point, this is probably as large as I would let them get. When you start seeing the bean kind of swell and bump out in the pod, it's probably a little bit past its prime. Here's a good example. Like this one is starting to yellow. The bean is plump, and you won't even really be able to eat the pod at all. But you would open this up and you would take the bean out. The beans are delicious. All right, let's spin this way. I mean, everything is looking really green, really lush. Should I say it one more time? It's all because of the watering. Like how the cucumber plant is trellising up here, open up the space down there. I take out a lot of the leaves and just let the air flow in. It makes it a lot easier for me to see the cucumbers. manage, again, pests and disease. If you go to my channel, you'll see a full video on caring for cucumbers, caring for squash, taking care of tomatoes mid-season, and just maintaining your plants. But I don't see why this one's not going to keep going for at least another 2 weeks producing if I just stick with what I'm doing. Really, really green. I mean, I'm very happy with how everything's going. Apple tree real quick. I just picked up some watermelons, cantaloupe, honeydew over at Freetown Farm, some transplants. I'm going to be getting more of those in just so I have fruit continuing to go, you know, throughout the rest of the season. I mean, it looks really, really nice. So hopefully you're not getting tired out with the heat. If you are, totally understand. You know, pick what you can do. Stay up on it the best you can. If you have time or your garden's really beat up, things aren't looking good, rip out the plants that are problematic. And you have plenty of time to really put in new crops now and maybe refresh, get ready for the fall. And I do really recommend using a journal to track when your diseases and pests show up. If you're still learning, you know, spraying every 10 to 14 days, starting a good month before problems show up in your garden is really the best way to go. But with time and experience, you can really assess your plants, adjust your sprays as you need, maybe cut down on a little bit on the workload. But if in doubt, just stick to a routine that works. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. And don't be afraid to rip out plants and just really start over. Plenty of time to get in another wave of cucumbers, squash, zucchini, all kinds of different plants. Like I was saying earlier, this plant was looking like this, you know, a little bit worse off, maybe, I don't know, 10, 14 days ago. Gave it some fertilizer, been watering it, but it's not really going anywhere. So don't keep old plants, just pull them out, start over, enjoy your garden, and I'll see all you guys next time.